what is your definition of the status of homelessness? Is it the lack of a place to stay indoors on a particular night, or is it something broader than that?
So homelessness...
Does it require more than that?
Right. Homelessness is defined as lacking a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime address. So if you have a home, you have a home. I'm not homeless when I go to Grants Pass because I have a home in D.C. The second part of our class definition focuses on whether the homeless person has access to shelter. That's not because that's part of the status. It's because when someone has access to shelter, then the ordinances aren't punishing them for the status. It's punishing them for the conduct of not going.
Well, I ask the question because if homelessness is defined as simply lacking a place to stay indoors on a particular night, then there is an ironclad connection between the conduct, which is sleeping outside, and the status of homelessness. But if homelessness is defined to require more than that, then my question would be whether someone who is lacking a place to stay on a particular night or for a particular period of time is homeless if the reason why the person finds himself or herself in that status is, for example, the person refuses to take antipsychotic medicine that's been prescribed, or refuses to go to drug rehab, or rehabilitation for alcoholism, or the person has chosen to move from one place where the person might have a shelter or a home where the person could live to another place. What about all of that?
So the status of homelessness is something that only changes once the person has a home. You lose your home, you're homeless. If you have a home again, then you're not in the status anymore. I think what your question gets at is that second piece, which is whether a person has access to shelter. That can change from day to day. And so...
No, that's not really what my question gets at. The question is, you can draw a distinction. Status is different from conduct. But there are some instances of conduct that are closely tied to status, or if homelessness is defined as simply lacking a place to stay on a particular night, they amount to the same thing. The definition of homelessness encompasses the conduct of sleeping outside. So my question is whether this is, what if the person finds that person in a homeless state because of prior life choices or the refusal to make future life choices? That's the question.
Yeah, so our definition of lacking access to shelter is lacking physical or legal access to shelter, and you're looking at the person's situation on that particular night. I think generally we're not doing an inquiry into all of a person's life choices that might have led them to the point where they're homeless and can't find a place to sleep. Robinson certainly didn't do that sort of analysis with respect to addiction, but there could be situations where there is such a tight causal nexus between a choice a person has made and their lack of shelter access that you would say this person has chosen not to take the shelter. And to be very clear, if you decline shelter that is physically and legally available to you, you're not in our class.
Well, see, the problem is that once you move away from the definition that makes the inquiry basically tautological, then you get into the question of assessing the closeness of the connection between the status and the conduct. And you do run into problems with the person who's a kleptomaniac, or a person who suffers from pedophilia. So how do you distinguish that? How does the court assess how close the connection has to be?
So for both of those categories, the status is defined. I don't know if status is the right word there. Being a pedophilia or having pedophilia is defined by the urge that you have, not by your conduct and acting on that urge. So if someone were to act on that urge, and then you had that tight causal nexus and why they didn't have access to shelter, then they would be outside of our claim.